Hey, welcome everybody to Americans for Truth Live. I'm Pete LaBarber with Americans for Truth about homosexuality, and I'm finally back in the People's Republic of Illinois, where taxes run high and freedom runs lower by the year. I had a great week in Washington, D.C. I used to herald from Washington, D.C. I began my life after college in D.C., and it's always interesting to come back. It's more congested than ever. It's crazier to drive around DC. Maybe some of you live there. Maybe some of you have worked there. If you visit, you get a picture of it, but it's really strange. And yet this is the power seat of America, and the media, both media and political power, basically, when it comes to politics. And it was really interesting. I was there for something called the Gone Too Far, the launch of the Gone Too Far movement, which is essentially a coalition of people of all faiths and all colors, coming out against the left's immoral agenda in America. And, we talk about LGBTQ, which stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. That's their word, not ours. And, but it's also, it's also everything. The left is radically pro-abortion. They're radically pro-gay, put that in quotes. Pro-queer, pro-transgender, which is basically the she-male agenda. These are men who want to be women. Women want to be men. Sometimes they radically change their body parts. Sometimes they try to hide who they are. You see women wearing these binders, which is really creepy, to make themselves have flat chest. Other women have their healthy breasts surgically removed, which we've talked about, including underage women. So we're going to start calling that the she-male movement, because that's what it is. It's, there's the whole world of she-male pornography, which is just creepy. But these are the gender confused, and they're out in force. And of course, the media sides with them. Whatever iteration the sex gender revolution is in, that's what the media sides with. And so we talked about that. We talked about how bogus it is for homosexual and transgender activists to claim civil rights status. They're basically ripping off the Black civil rights movement, which is, if I were African American, I'd find that pretty upsetting, and many Blacks do. And in fact, we heard from some African American speakers at the conference. Jared, see if you can tee up Pastor Stefan BRODIN, who spoke at the Gone Too Far press event at the National Press Club last week. Do you have him loaded? Let's play Stefan BRODIN, who articulated why this is not part of the real civil rights movement.
Gone too far.
Gone too far.
We're here, and we're representing, I think, a perspective that needs to be heard and understood. Yes. To give you some context, Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced before the midterm election last year that one of her top legislative priorities was to pass into law H.R. 2282, the Equality Act. Gone Too Far finds her ambition to be in defiance of the clear threat that this bill has against the legacy of liberty afforded Americans in our Constitution and Declaration of Independence. H.R. 2282, the Equality Act, will undermine and usurp the Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993. It will alter free speech and freedom of expression profoundly for those who fundamentally disagree with the transgenderism and gender fluidity as presented by the LGBTQ community. These bedrock principles, freedom of speech and freedom of expression, are essential to who we are as a people and as a nation. The bill's introduction has language which read, quote, to prohibit discrimination on the basis of sex, gender, identity, sexual orientation, and for other purposes,
My.
If this language is added to the 1964 Civil Rights Bill, it will open the door to protect lifestyle choices and behavior that defies historical and contemporary science and biology in Western civilization. Impinge upon the privacy of gender-specific showers and bathrooms across America.
Wow.
The last phrase is especially troubling, as it seems to open the door to ideas and practices outside the norm of common pedophilia and bestiality could be construed to fit into the implication of that phrase.
Absolutely.
H.R. 2282 effectively transfers protection of civil rights struggle fought for largely by African Americans to wealthy white men who have never suffered systematic or structural racism and discrimination based on color, class, or African indigenous origin. Speaker Pelosi and the sponsors of the Equality Act bill have gone too far. Gone too far in defying and redefining life. Gone too far in defining the lifestyle choices as a civil rights. Gone too far in encroaching on our First Amendment rights to religious liberty and free speech. Gone too far in redefining morality away from our nation's Judeo-Christian heritage. Gone too far from following the principles, the founding principles that made America the freest nation on the plain. This act, H.R. 2282, is sinister. It is the gateway to a moral depravity that will ultimately destroy this nation. We are foursquare against it, and we encourage our elected officials and our spiritual leaders across this nation to push back against an agenda that Nancy Pelosi and over 200 Democrats in the House are sponsoring.
Gone too far.
Now, Jared, note there that he's talking about the so-called Equality Act. Almost all the Democrats in the last Congress sponsored it. Nancy Pelosi said it's her highest priority, and this bill would federalize rights based on sexual perversion. That's what it would do, and not just sexual perversion, gender rebellion. And I thought that was an eloquent statement against the Equality Act, which Scott Lively has renamed the Homo Supremacy Act. I've called it the Criminalizing Christianity Act. This is the bill which would take away, put a nail in the freedom, the right of people to live out their moral beliefs. We're already seeing these beliefs, our ability to live out our faith, eroded under state and city sexual orientation codes, so-called non-discrimination codes. As I've said before, they are all about discriminating. They pursue their own form of discrimination. It's a reverse discrimination against people of faith, against anybody who has the temerity to say, I don't believe in homosexuality. I believe it's wrong. I don't believe in so-called homosexual marriage. It's not marriage. And if they act on those beliefs and then say, for example, I don't want to be part of a homosexual so-called marriage. I don't want to give employee benefits to an employee, marital benefits based on an employee says, well, I'm married, but I'm homosexual. That's what this Equality Act will be used for. Okay, Jared, let's pull up Dan Fisher, who's an awesome guy, and who also spoke at the Gone Too Far press event.
Baby. Samuel, the Old Testament prophet, declared, obeying God is better than sacrifice. And Micah, another Old Testament prophet, preached that we should do that which is right. We turn to the truth of God's Word in order to understand that which is right. Jesus even called himself the truth. All truth is God's truth, and His truth applies to all people, at all times, and in all places. There is not one truth for men and another for women. One for blacks, another for whites. One for heterosexuals, and another for those identifying as LGBTQ. There is just truth. God created mankind, human sexuality, and the institution of marriage, so He alone has the authority to define them and regulate them. The book of Genesis declares that God created the first man and woman as complementary sexual beings, joined them together as husband and wife, and declared sexual intimacy within marriage as pure. For the purpose of purity and oneness, God commanded husbands and wives to be faithful to one another in every way, especially through sexual fidelity.
Amen.
When asked about marriage, Jesus quoted from Genesis and reiterated that marriage is exclusively a union of a biological man and a biological woman. He further teaches that any sexual activity outside of God's original definition and purpose is sin. Unlike skin color, ethnicity, biological sexual identity, and other immutable genetic traits, one's sexual behavior is an act of choice, and therefore can be and must be governed by moral and man-made laws. Immoral behavior is not a civil right.
Amen.
Immoral
Amen.
behavior is not a civil right. So if Congress, if Congress attempts to label as a civil right that which has been understood by generations as immoral, it would not only be reversing centuries of Western Judeo-Christian thought, but would be in essence, as Pastor BRODIN said, actually rendering historic Orthodox Christianity illegal, and thus be violating the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees freedom of speech and freedom of religion. This is why we believe a proclamation for morality is necessary at this time. We have written such a proclamation that can be found on our website at gonetoofar.org using the number 2. We are calling upon all God-fearing Christians to stand with us by going to our website, gonetoofar.org, and adding their names to our proclamation. By doing so, we are declaring that we are standing on firm biblical footing and the very laws of nature and of nature's God upon which our union was founded.
Amen.
We are calling on Congress to abandon the present misguided attempt to declare any sexual behavior as a civil right, thus creating special protected sexual minorities. We are further calling upon Congress to immediately end our modern-day Holocaust of the murder of the unborn by abortion. While ending this horrific slaughter of the most innocent among us, Congress must also immediately end taxpayer funding of this barbaric practice, often promoted under the banner and ruse of health care. And I might add, just yesterday, our Senate refused to affirm the right of a fully delivered child, the right to live.
That's right.
Scripture teaches, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord.
Yes.
2 Chronicles 7:14 says, if God's people will turn from their wicked ways, He will hear, forgive their sin, and heal their land.
That's right.
God help us that we may return to the God of our fathers and practice the traditional biblical decency and morality that have heretofore made us a great people. Go to our website, gonetoofar.org.
Okay, Jared.
The number 2. And
That's just a wonderful speech there by Pastor Dan Fisher, and he's going to be holding the conference we're having that's coming up in Oklahoma City, the God's Voice Conference, which is responding to the Revoice Conference. And that website, I have 2 websites. The Gone Too Far was gone, the number 2far.org. God's Voice is godsvoice.us. And this is February 22nd, 23rd. I will be speaking. We're talking about the advance of LGBTQ Christianity, in which there are people who claim to be faithful Christians who want to be recognized as a sexual minority. And that minority would be, according to the definition of the homosexual lobby, LGBTQ, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer. And so if any of you can get to that conference, Oklahoma City, February 22nd, 23rd, you will not be disappointed. We are in the front lines of fighting back against gay Christianity, which is only the latest incremental movement of the LGBTQ lobby. Now there's the Gone Too Far. Right there on the screen is the Gone Too Far website, gonetoofar.org. There you have Desmond is amazing, the poor boy whose parents are allowing him to identify as a drag queen or a drag kid. I mean, isn't it amazing where America is coming? I think Dan Fisher really hit the nail on the head there when he said, immoral behavior is not a civil right. Take that message everywhere you can. If you are a Christian, tell your pastor, tell your friends, because it is the number one reason that the entire homosexual activist, transgender, she-male agenda, queer agenda, all of those are not civil rights, because you cannot create rights based on immoral behavior. Our rights are rooted in God, a liberty established by God. That's what makes America so unique. And I just want to talk a little bit in the time we have left about some of my experiences in D.C. Did you know that the old House of Representatives, which is now in the Capitol, it has been, before the Capitol building was expanded, there were thousands of church services held in that space. So when you hear a left-winger talk about the separation of church and state, it is in their interest to hide the incredibly rich Christian history that America has. And so what Pastor Fisher is saying, and what I believe, is, we don't have the authority to redefine what is good, what is evil, what is right, what is wrong. This is God's purview. And yet you have the left coming in with their insidious message and their false, sort of hype, love is love, all these euphemisms that the left is so good at. It's all about recreating morality according to a humanist, man-centered way of thinking, it's just wrong. And I was so touched by a Ukrainian group. I had an opportunity to go to a prayer meeting that was held in the Capitol. Yes, to this day, there are still prayer meetings held in our in offices in the Capitol building, the United States Capitol. Thank God for that. There are Christians trying to remind everybody about America's Christian heritage. And so I went to this wonderful prayer service. And there were Bible teaching there, and then we went to the rotunda, and I was able to listen as Ukrainians who's actually a Ukrainian man and his brother and sister, his two sisters, whose father had been persecuted by Soviet communism, by the Kremlin. His father had been persecuted, and he is now a citizen of the United States. His son and his two sisters. So his children are now citizens of the U.S. And one of them prayed there in the Capitol, and it was so touching to hear him say how here he was, the son of a man persecuted by communism, Soviet communism, now a citizen of the United States, able to pray in the nation's capital. And it was so wonderful to hear these people who appreciate American freedom. And now they're warning the country, look, you are headed towards socialism. We know socialism. Our father was persecuted. I believe he was jailed for 9 years, jailed under communism. And socialism is the precursor to communism. And he goes around the country now trying to warn Americans, no, you don't know what socialism is. And there were other wonderful believers who were praying there in the nation's capital. And there was we got to see where the desk of Abraham Lincoln was and where the desk of John Adams was when they were in the House of Representatives. And it was just an amazing time. And so there was that. And then I got to meet a Christian leader from Latvia, who was also right now, they are fighting against this insidious LGBTQ agenda, which is trying to force its way mainly through the European Union and other outside forces, some rooted in America, by the way, on the left. The left is trying to push homosexuality, abortion on demand, pornography all over the world. So America has gone from a nation which once was it still is, I believe, the leading sending out missionaries and as a tremendous force of good in other lands. Now Americans, some rich Americans on the left and left-wing groups, led by people like George Soros, and others, pushing this radical sexual agenda on the world. And so I got to meet a wonderful Christian leader from Latvia, and they are trying to fight back against this immoral push, a lot of which comes out of the United States of America. And so America has perverted freedom, and we are pushing this. But let's remember that we also can fight back here in the United States. The left got where it is today, and especially the homosexual movement, through a lot of hard work. They raised funds. They lied a lot. Yeah, to be sure. They definitely lied a lot. Remember what we talked about with the 10% myth. That's a lie. It was actually created by a gay activist to exaggerate the numbers of homosexual activists. They lied about born gay, and we'll be learning a lot about that on our show. And so, yes, they used trickery. Alfred Kinsey, we talked about his mammoth lies on Friday. He used data, so-called, from a pedophile, and he lied about his research, and he exaggerated the depths to which depravity had penetrated this country, and he claimed ridiculous things like adultery was rampant. This is in the 50s, late 40s. Adultery, homosexuality, he claimed that 37%, I believe, 37%, I think that's the number, or maybe 39% of all men in America had engaged in homosexual behavior. And he got to those numbers because he over-interviewed. His data sample was weighted disproportionately towards criminals and sex radicals. So, but America didn't know this, and the media, of course, didn't focus on that. And so here we are today, reaping the whirlwind of what's been pushed by the left for so many years. And now we find ourselves looking around and saying, oh my gosh, we've got Democrats pushing abortion on demand all the way through and up to birth and even past birth. The Virginia Governor Northam, the famous quote now, the infamous quote by Dr. Northam. Can you imagine a doctor who says it's okay to eliminate a baby after he or she has been born? And we see that agenda, and we see pornography just rampant. We see Netflix, which is widely looked at and viewed by especially younger generations. Netflix, every show has that gay character, that gay couple, and it's obvious propaganda, but it works. It breaks down norms, and that's why we're here. We're fighting back, and I'm glad to be a part of the Gone Too Far movement and the God's Voice. Jared, pull that God's Voice up again. The God's Voice press event coming up in Oklahoma City. It's very reasonable to come. If you're a student, we'll give you a discount. There's still room for booths. If you have a group, you want to have an organization, you want to have yourself represented there, and reach out. These are Christians trying to draw the line on the latest iteration of the gay agenda. Remember, we're in the 50th year since the Stonewall Rebellion, the 50th year of in-your-face gay activism. It's a revolution, everybody. And if you don't understand that, you have a lot of learning to do. And that's what we're all about. And I'll be speaking there. That is in Oklahoma City, in Edmond, Oklahoma, just north of Oklahoma City, actually. And we've got Janet Mefford, one of the top Christian talk show hosts in the nation, Reverend Al Baker, Reverend Tom Littleton, who's got tons of facts about how this pro-gay affirming agenda. And remember, they're doing it by increments. Now they're saying, no, we don't want to practice homosexuality, but we want to be identified as a minority, a gay minority in the church. Well, wait a minute. That's a sin-based minority. Why? Where does the church recognize other sins? I don't see active outreaches towards the gossiper community or the incest community or the promiscuous straight man community or the fornicators community. So why are we reaching out to and identifying as Christians a gay minority? Christianity is all about leaving your sin behind. And I'm so happy to know another, if you could turn the speakers there, Jared, Stephen Black speaking. We've interviewed him on our show already. He's a former homosexual. He got out of the lifestyle. Stephen's speaking, and he's going to give his testimony. David Pickup is an expert on this war on the ex-gay movement. The homosexual lobby doesn't like that people leave that lifestyle behind, and so they've declared war on it. And now they're trying to ban so-called, they call it conversion therapy to try to sound scary, but it's actually just talk therapy, helping sexually confused kids find an identity rooted in normalcy, in heterosexuality, which is how God obviously made us. There's David Pickup. And so come to the God's Voice, sign up for it, godsvoice.us, godsvoice.us. Sign up, and I will see you there. And it's going to be an exciting event, but we're fighting back. That's what it's all about. And Jared, pull up the way you can help us on our show. Our website is americansfortruth.org, americansfortruth.org or .com. And we need your help. Make a $5 donation on our websites. The button's right there on the top right. Also sign up for our newsletter, but you can sign up as a regular giver. But we need your help because we want to fight back. I know I've been in this for 25 years. I've forgotten more than most people know about this movement just because I've been at it so long. And people like Scott Lively, who also spoke at the Gone Too Far press event. We are going to bring you experts in the field. We're going to equip you to fight because you cannot rely on the media. The media is always pro-gay, pro-trans, pro-queer. That's the media. They're part of the movement. And that's why we need you. We're going to be interviewing this woman, hopefully, who wrote this piece that's on the screen. I'm a woman, not a cisgender. And I'll tell you right now, I'm a man, not a cisgender. Cisgender is basically the left-wing word for normal. So there's all sorts of agendas with an entire semantic code that they're pushing on us, but we're fighting back. And we need your help. So make a small gift, make a large gift if you can at americansfortruth.org. But folks, the world, as you know, we're only on this planet a short time. Life is too short to be politically correct. So join us, help us to fight back against the left-wing LGBTQ forces that are actually bringing tyranny to this country because they will use the government to shut us down if they can. And that's what that Equality Act will be used for. So always remember that as a Christian, as a citizen, as a moral-minded person of faith or of no faith, it is up to you to defend the truth because ultimately it's not our truth, it's God's truth, and we have a duty to defend it. I'll see you tomorrow on Americans for Truth Live. Thank you.